Welcome to Backbone Unlimited. My name is Matt Hartsky. In this episode, give me 15 minutes and I guarantee I'll change the way you hunt elk, or at least the way you think about it. Because most elk hunters are asking the wrong question. They walk into elk country asking, where are the elk? But the better question is, why would elk be here right now? And that one shift changes everything. Elk are not random. They're not wandering around the mountain by accident. They're making decisions based on food, security, wind, terrain, breeding pressure, and human pressure. And if you don't understand why elk choose certain places at certain times, you're always going to feel like you're just chasing ghosts. If you're not familiar with who I am, I've been hunting and guiding Western big game for over 34 years, and I've been a professional strength conditioning and nutrition coach for more than 30 years, and I'm here to help you become a more successful and consistent elk hunter. So this episode is not about hiking harder, calling louder, or hoping for luck. It's about learning how to read the mountain, predict elk behavior, and make better hunting decisions. This is the first shift I want you to make. Stop looking at elk country like you're simply trying to find animals and start looking at elk country like you're trying to understand why elk would choose that exact place at that exact time. That is a big difference. A lot of elk hunters look at a basin or a ridge or a meadow, maybe a wallow or a patch of timber, and they say, that looks good to me. But good looking country, elky country, doesn't always hold elk. And even when it does hold elk, it might not hold them during your hunt, during that weather pattern, during that pressure level, or during that time of day. Elk don't live somewhere because it looks good to us, right? They use country because it solves a problem for them. They need the right kind of food. They need the right kind of water. They need the right kind of security. They need wind advantage. They need escape routes. They need good bedding cover. And during the rut, bulls also need access to cows and a way to manage pressure from other bulls and hunters or predators. So when you're looking at a piece of country, don't just ask, are there elk here? Ask better questions. Where would elk feed here without exposing themselves for too long? Where would they bed with the wind in their favor? How would they move from feed to cover? Where would they go if hunters came in from the road, the trailhead, or the obvious glassing points? Where could a bull hold cows and still feel secure? That's how you start reading elk country differently. You're not just looking for sign, you're looking for a reason. Fresh tracks, rubs, beds, and poop all matter, but they matter more when they're connected to a pattern that you recognize. The mountain always gives clues, but the key is learning when those clues are connected, right? The second shift I need you to make is understanding what pressure really does. A lot of elk hunters hit the mountain after opening weekend, after a few days of bugling, or after they see trucks at every trailhead, and they immediately say the elk are gone. Too much. Sometimes elk do leave. There are times when that pressure, the weather, the feed changes, or migration movement can pull elk into a different part of the country. But a lot of the time, elk don't vanish. They just change how much risk they're willing to take. And that's a huge difference. Before pressure, elk might feed longer in the open. They might use obvious meadows more, like visible parks or easy benches, and they might vocalize more freely. But once hunters start moving through that country, elk begin tightening up. They might move less in daylight. They might bed earlier. They might shift into timber. They might slide into deeper, steeper pockets, broken terrain, north-facing cover, private land edges, or even just ugly places that a lot of elk hunters walk past because they don't look exciting or fun from a map. Pressure doesn't always push elk miles away. Sometimes it just pushes them into the safest nearby option. And that's why the answer is not always go further. Sometimes further is right, but sometimes smarter is better. So ask yourself, if I were an elk and hunters were coming from the road, the trail, the ridge, or the easy glassing point, where could I still eat, bed, and smell danger and escape if I needed to without exposing myself? That question changes your hunt. Now you're not reacting emotionally to the pressure you experienced. You're using pressure as information. Every truck, camp, boot track, bugle, ATV, and blown out drainage is going to tell you something about where elk might no longer feel safe, because it's going to also tell you where the next safest option might be. And that's where mature elk often end up.
Hey, if you hunt public land elk and you're tired of grinding through random seasons,
I built the elk hunting series of ebooks for you. Most hunters don't struggle because they lack effort. They struggle because they lack a system. And that's exactly why I built the elk hunting ebook series as a complete progressive framework for Western elk hunters who are done guessing and ready to hunt with intention. Volume 1 is going to be Foundations in Reality. I reset your mindset and expose the assumptions that quietly wreck seasons. In Volume 2, Finding Elk and Understanding Pressure, you'll learn how elk actually move under pressure so you can anticipate instead of react. In Volume 3, Terrain, Wind, and Position, I break down how to use landscape and thermals to consistently create opportunities. In Volume 4, Calling, Silence, and Pressure, sound becomes a decision tool, not an impulse. In Volume 5, Bow Hunting Execution, we're talking about close range strategy so you can finish your encounters. And in Volume 6, Late Season and Post Rut, we're talking about how elk shift after the rut and how to adapt when others quit. This is a system built for consistency. This isn't theory, it's a structured system to help you find elk, read country, and make confident decisions every season. Buy each volume individually or bundle them all to save 50% off at backboneunlimited.com. The third shift I need you to understand is that wind is not just something you check before you make a move. Wind is part of how elk survive, right? Look at it from their perspective. A lot of elk hunters treat wind like a detail. They pull out a wind checker, see which way it's blowing, and then decide whether they can keep going. But elk are often using the same wind before you ever get there. They bed with it, they travel with it, they stage with it. They use it to monitor danger from directions they can't see. And that means your hunt doesn't start when you see elk or hear a bugle. Your hunt starts when you ask, how is the wind allowing these elk to feel safe right now? And that's why some setups are dead before the hunter ever makes the first call. You might know elk are in a patch of timber. You might have fresh sign. You might even hear a bull talking. But if the only way to approach sends your scent into the bedding cover, you don't have a hunt. You have information. There's a difference there. To kill elk consistently, you need more than just elk location. You need a huntable setup, and that means understanding morning thermals, evening thermals, wind switches, crosswinds, drainages, saddles, benches, and the places where air gets unstable. It also means being honest when the wind is not giving you permission to hunt those elk. A lot of elk encounters are ruined because hunters try to force a setup that the wind already said no to. Almost right is usually wrong. Elk don't have to see you. They don't have to hear you. If they smell you, the game is over. So stop thinking of wind as a detail and start thinking of wind as the elk's security system. Your job is not to just deal with it on your terms. Your job is to understand it from the elk's perspective and then beat it. Now, the fourth shift is changing the way you think about calling. A lot of elk hunters call because they want elk to answer. They love the talking. I love the talking. But a lot of guys bugle to hear a bugle. They cow call to hear a bugle. They make noise because silence makes them uncomfortable. But calling is not just about getting a response. Calling is about creating a believable situation that causes an elk to make a decision. You're trying to tell him a story that he believes so much that he wants to make a decision about that sound that is in your favor. And that's the part that a lot of elk hunters miss. Before you make a sound, you've got to ask yourself, what am I trying to make this elk do? Am I trying to locate him? Am I trying to keep him talking? Am I trying to pull him into range? Am I trying to sound like a cow that got separated? Am I trying to create herd realism? Am I trying to challenge him? Am I trying to make him think another bull is moving in on his cows? Every single sound needs a purpose, or you don't make it. If you don't know what decision you're trying to create, you're probably just making noise or giving him the wrong information. So noise can absolutely hurt you. A bull might answer and still not come. He might circle downwind. He might gather his cows and take off. He might shut up because the sound doesn't match the setup, his mood, what's actually happening in his world. He might already know exactly where you are, and now you just gave him one more reason not to commit. Now, that's why calling has to be tied to terrain, wind, cover, position, that bull's actual attitude, the actual scenario, not just thinking that every time you encounter elk or that you want an elk encounter, you're just going to rely on that same calling tool. And you've got to think in more advanced chess style moves, right? If a bull responds, where can he approach from? Where's he going to try to get the wind? Where are your shooting lanes? Where's your cover? Can you kill him if he does exactly what a smart bull should do? Calling should never be separated from the setup, right? They're intertwined. The goal is to not just sound busy. The goal is to sound believable enough to make that elk act the way that you want him to. The fifth shift is the one that ties all of this together. I want you to stop reacting to the mountain emotionally and start running a system. Most elk hunters don't fail because they're not trying hard enough or that they don't want it bad enough. They fail because every decision they make is based on the last thing that happened. They hear a bugle, so they chase it. They see fresh signs, so they camp on it. They get winded once, so they abandon the whole drainage. They call and get no answer, so they assume there's no elk. They hike further because they feel like doing more must be the answer to hunting better. But elk hunting isn't about stacking random effort. It's about making the next best decision with the information you have. And that's why I like to think in a simple system. And I've talked about this a lot, but it is absolutely worth repeating. Locate, evaluate, position, execute, and adjust. We're going to locate. That doesn't always mean finding elk with your eyes. It might mean just finding fresh sign or hearing a bugle, identifying pressure, reading feed, or finding the terrain that gives elk a reason to be there. Evaluate. That means asking whether that information is current, huntable, connected to food security, wind, pressure, and movement, all the things that elk must have. Position means slowing down enough to get the wind, terrain, cover, timing, and approach all right before you make your move. Execute. That means committing only when the setup gives you a real chance and you do it slowly, on purpose, with maturity, right? And then we adjust. And that means learning from every single experience, positive or negative, whether that's a success or a blown stalk, a silent basin, a wind swirl, a track crossing, a bull that answered but wouldn't come. None of it is wasted if you let it sharpen your next decision and it builds your toolbox. That's the real difference. I think average elk hunters measure the hunt by effort, and they throw away too much of the learning opportunity that we had every single time we're out there. But the most consistent elk hunters I know measure the hunt by decision quality. So when you stop reacting and start running a system, the mountain becomes a lot less confusing. You might not control the elk or the weather or the pressure, but you can absolutely control how clearly you think through all of it. So if this episode does anything for you, I hope it changes the way that you think when you step into elk country. At least gives you some things to think about, because elk hunting is not random. It's not guessing. It's not just hoping. We're not just lucky when we find elk. Elk are making decisions based on food, security, wind, terrain, bedding pressure, and human pressure. And the more you understand all of those decisions and how elk respond to them, the less you're going to feel like you're just wandering around hoping something happens. So stop asking only, where are the elk? And start asking, why would elk be here right now? That question is going to change how you scout, how you glass, how you call, how you move, and how you recover when a plan falls apart. You don't need to hunt perfectly either. That is not what I'm saying at all. I make thousands of mistakes every season, but you do need to think more clearly, adjust faster, and make better decisions than the other hunters around you. And that's how you become more consistent. That's how you hunt with backbone. Now, if you want to go deeper into elk movement, pressure patterns, terrain positioning, and structured decision making, that's exactly why I built the elk hunting series of ebooks. It's a progressive system designed to help you understand how elk actually use country and how to position yourself accordingly. I have a link to those ebooks in the description. And if you want ongoing access to the Team Backbone community, classroom, my full digital vault of elk resources, private discussions, and direct communication to me for planning, you can join Team Backbone at backboneunlimited.com underneath our membership tab. Everything we talk about here is connected. Preparation is not a single video, it's a system. Thanks for being here. I appreciate every single one of you. I look forward to seeing you in the comments. Until next time, train harder, hunt smarter, and never settle.